Welcome everyone to another installment of the Fall Environmental Resilience Speaker Series, jointly presented by Indiana University's Integrated Program in the Environment and the Environmental Resilience Institute. I'm Sarah Mincy. I'm the Director of the Integrated Program in the Environment and Managing Director for ERI. And I'm so pleased that you're able to join us today. Both IPE and ERI are founded on the understanding that interdisciplinary learning and research are essential to teach today's scholars and to solve today's problems, not to mention tomorrow's. So we're really pleased to facilitate conversations with some of today's leading environmental resilience experts from across the disciplines to address topics from climate change to the socio-environmental challenges that are affecting our health, our communities, and our economy, both here in Bloomington and around the world. Before we get started, we wish to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous communities native to this region and recognize that Indiana University Bloomington is built on Indigenous homelands and resources. We recognize the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. I want to tell you a little bit about IPE and ERI. IPE was founded in 2012 by the provost and the leadership of the O'Neill School, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the School of Public Health. And we bring together sustainability scholarship and environmental scholarship from these schools and departments on the Bloomington campus. ERI was founded in 2017 as a part of the IU Prepared for Environmental Change Grand Challenge. Its mission is to enhance resilience to environmental change in Indiana and beyond, by accurately predicting impacts and effectively partnering with communities to implement feasible, equitable, and research-informed solutions. IPE and ERI faculty, staff, and students have worked to bring us a really great set of speakers for this semester. I'm really excited about it. Pretty much every other Friday at noon is when we've had these scheduled. And in a couple of weeks, I'm pleased that we'll be hosting the Trust for Public Lands, Brendan Shane. So mark your calendars for that upcoming event. You'll be able to find information about each of the talks that we have in this series on ERI and IPE's web pages and in the regular newsletters and upcoming events and notices on our organization's communications pages. And we encourage you to sign up for our newsletters so that you're able to get reminders about these events and talks, as well as other news from IPE and ERI. Finally, logistically, I just want to let you know that we encourage you to put your questions into the chat box during the speaker's talk, and then we'll monitor those, and there'll be an opportunity for us to ask those towards the end. And before we begin, I also would like to acknowledge our sponsors for today's event. Our fall speaker series, actually the whole series, is sponsored by the Resilience Semester from the College of Arts and Sciences. And I'm also really pleased to share that Elaine and Phil Emmy sponsored today's talk. So thank you to the Emmys for that. At long last, please let me introduce today's speaker, Tatjana Rebelle. Tatjana is a mother, activist, organizer, writer, performer, and promoter. They have lived in Indianapolis most of their life, which is where they learned to use their writing to deal with growing up in the Midwest as a non-binary, first-generation Afro-German and queer. They've founded Vocab Indie, a monthly cultural arts event centering QTBIPOC communities in 1997, and stepped away from curating the events in 2020 to pursue writing, traveling, and their work with Earth Charter Indiana. They have been fighting in the front lines of social justice for communities of color and QTBIPOC rights for nearly a decade. They're currently the Resilient Schools Coordinator with Earth Charter Indiana, leading the Indy Thriving Schools Program, a certification and grants program for schools tackling sustainability and climate change within the school system. Their work gives them the chance to follow their idol, Bayard Rustin, and his footsteps in speaking truth to power and taking a stance against global and local oppression. So I'm going to turn it over now to Tatjana. We're excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having this opportunity to talk with you all. I'm really excited to be able to share my experience in moving into what environmental justice and environmental resiliency looks like. I actually don't come from a college background. I come from a frontlines activist background. So a lot of what I'll be discussing will be about my journey from actually kind of a young child into becoming where I'm at right now and what I'm an activist for environmental justice. I am going to have a bit of a presentation. I do hope that you guys will take some time to share any questions you have in the chat box, and I hope that we'll be able to have a discussion afterwards about what it looks like for resiliency from the ground up moving forward. So let me make sure I do this correctly. Give me a moment, please. All right. Like I said, I'm really excited about doing this. What we'll be discussing is my work as an organizer, right? Moving through, going from protesting at the State House on the ground, as well as moving into the nonprofit realm and working with social justice groups, as well as anarchists and politicians and the whole lot. And I'll be discussing my experience moving through there. What we have today on today's agenda, I'm just going to set some intentions on what my hope is for this discussion. Also discuss what we do at Earth Charter Indiana and go into how I became an activist, and then really think about what community-focused activism looks like, especially not just in the world of environmental justice, but in justice for all in general. As far as the intentions go, like I said before, there is not one way to liberation. I am one person, and this is about my experience moving through the world and navigating the world. I don't have solutions to climate change. I wish I did. Wouldn't that be great, right? Being able to sit here and be like, this is how we solve the world problems. But I do have insight, and I'm really honored and grateful to be able to share that with you in this realm. I really want us to think about what that word resilience is, right? The definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. As was stated in my bio, I experience the world as a biracial, femme and Black presenting, non-binary child of an immigrant, right? So resilience is in my blood. It runs deep. It is something that I almost wish didn't exist, right? Like I often dream of a world where resilience isn't a topic and it's something that we're striving for, but really working to create a world where resilience isn't necessary because we all actually have the means and the goods and what we actually need to survive as human beings. Like I said prior, this is the lens that I'm coming from. So please respect that, which goes to my other intention of, I really want this to be a place of learning and listening, right? And I will most likely say something that could possibly upset or something. I have a tendency to do that. It comes with the territory of existing as I do. I do hope that no matter what I say, if it is something that you don't agree with or something that kind of makes you want to take that moment in reaction, to really take a moment to think about why that exists and really kind of do that self-reflection on thinking about why me speaking from my experience might cause you to react in a certain way, and have us really get in a dialogue and respect each other as we navigate this conversation. I will say this is not a diversity, equity, and inclusion talk. I have spent, as you will learn soon, many years of my life focusing on that. I have made a conscious choice in my life to not focus on the trauma or terror that other people inflict on me or other people due to colonialization, institutional racism, or systematic oppression. while I will be talking about those things, I'm hoping that we can all kind of come from a baseline of knowing that that just exists, right? So I won't have to go into the real like definition of what that looks like. And then be able to use that baseline to then get into a little bit more deeper of a conversation on experience and what that looks like. If there is a moment where you feel like you really want to delve into figuring out more about what diversity, inclusion, and equity look like for you, I highly suggest you getting into some research on your own. There is a group called SURGE, which is Showing Up for Racial Justice. They are a great resource for those that are trying to learn how to navigate as a non-BIPOC person in a world that is working to center BIPOC voices. I also just like to say that if you are in a space of wanting to learn more and have BIPOC people in your community, to please make sure that it is something that they want to discuss with you, and if possible, pay them for their efforts. You know, this work is not easy, and it's something that I hope that we all take on. As I see it, racial justice is a part of all of our work, no matter what world or realm you are in. It should be at the core of everything that we do. I appreciate the land acknowledgement. I also want to share resources on if you're looking to integrate and move towards reconciliation with our Indigenous communities. The American Indian Center here in Indiana is a great resource, as well as the American Indian Movement of Illinois and Indiana. And if you are ever out traveling, a fun tip that I like to get out there, especially in this world of social media, there is a website and an app called nativeland.ca. It is not 100% accurate, but they try to do their best to do that. It will let you know whose, I don't want to say whose land, right? Because none of us own the land, but traditionally who's the people that occupied that land and lived in that land prior to colonization. I always suggest if you're posting vacation pics, I recently had the honor of traveling out west, and one of the smallest things that we can do is just acknowledge the fact that we are on land that has been colonized. And really, even if it's just social media, acknowledging that as naming the land that you're on, not just the colonized state name, if you will, is a great way to kind of get that dialogue and really work towards centering our Indigenous community. A little bit about Earth Charter. Very aware that many of the other 2 members, there's 3 of us, have been in this field with you all, and we work together a lot with the Institute in the work towards combating climate change. But I kind of just like to give a, just in case people are here that aren't familiar with Earth Charter Indiana, who we are as an organization. We are an organization of 3. I am the latest member. I'm on my 3rd year here as part of Earth Charter Indiana, which has just been such a great experience for me. We work on intergenerational work and education throughout the state of Indiana. A lot of my work deals with Marion County specifically, but Shannon and Jim have been able to be in this work for quite some time on a statewide coalition to move forward. Shannon Anderson focuses mostly on policy and political advocacy when it comes to working through climate change. She is also a biologist, I believe, by trade, not by trade, by college, right? And I want to think it's like molecular cell biology or something along those lines, and moved into advocacy, political advocacy from there. Jim Poyser is a legend among legends, if you will. I know him as a writer through working through Nouveau, but also know him as just one of like a powerhouse, really centering the conversation of climate change and climate advocacy in Indiana and the world, and really moving forward in doing that. Now, some of the programs that we do, this is not all of them. I will not go over all of them here, but I really feel it's important. I've come to realize in being a part of the Earth Charter Indiana family that a lot of people actually don't know what we do. for a long time, for the past 20 years, right? This organization has been on the ground leading this fight in Indiana, of all places, to combat climate change. And it all started 20 years ago. This is our 20th anniversary with John Gibson, who recently passed, and Jerry King, who met to discuss after the Earth Charter, a national document working towards combating climate change, came out. Earth Charter Indiana is the only chapter in the United States that is a part of this group and this movement. And that's something that I think we should really be proud of. These are some of the areas that we work in. I do want to highlight a few of them as they're kind of pertinent to everyone, right? Obviously, it's climate change. It's something that's pertinent to everyone. It's us fighting for our future and our survival, right? One of the things that we do is the climate recovery solutions. As you'll see, those are actually in two different areas, right? Not just municipally, but also youth-centered. We have been able to help pass climate resolutions in 10 cities throughout the state of Indiana. We've also been able to have some schools, Heron, Riverside High School, as well as Shortridge, to make claims of essentially a climate emergency and really getting our government as well as student bodies, right? This is something that you could do in your respective schools at IU. It's to be able to really make a statement and a claim that, you know, this is real and it's actually happening, and we really need to make that effort to move past it and into a direction where we're not kind of facing uncertainty and doom, right? Climate change is not in itself, it could be a hard conversation because in the end, it's not as beautiful as we want it to be. But we are doing the work, right? And one of those ways is through the climate recovery solutions. One of the things that I'm really proud of and excited about is our Resiliency Coordinators program. As an activist, it means the world to me to know that this program exists, right? This program is where throughout the state of Indiana, we kind of build community in relation with on the ground activists and organizers in those cities, and then give them the support they need to really do the work in their areas. One of the things that I have learned in this work is when you're not from a community, it's best to not show up and be like, this is what you need to do to fix yourself, right? But instead, give that platform to the people that are there, that are already doing the work, that are already in community and relations with the people there. And that's what our Resiliency Coordinator program is. Another one of the things, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to touch base on some of them that I think is really exciting. The Youth Ambassadors program is one that I'm also a part of and head of, and it's actually 10-year-olds. It's up to the age of 10. I think we're going to move it to 12. We'll see how that goes, of kids that really are passionate about speaking up and using their platforms and their voices to ensure that they have a future that they deserve. My program, my main focus is the Thriving Schools program. Over the past 3 years, we have been able to grant over $125,000 to schools for their sustainability projects. We have worked with 64 different schools within Marion County. We have now gotten our first one in Danville just this year as we're piloting to move that program statewide. The goal of this program is really to support schools, and for me, center schools and the youth and what sustainability looks like. I believe that schools are the community hubs, and this really gives it a chance to support them as that. What kids learn in school is something that they carry on with them. They then become advocates for those things in their home. That kind of bleeds out into the community. We work on school gardens to help feed families in schools. We work on kind of the greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So that's the zero waste cafeteria programs, composting, recycling programs, whatnot. And then I'm really excited that next year we'll be launching a school garden liaison program, which will be taking youth that are within the community, often sometimes not able to be, how do I say this? I don't want to say successful in school, but traditionally school might not be a place where they can thrive, right? And really teaching those kids and partnering them with a community garden or farm to intern, to learn, to then become the resource for our school gardens in the summertime, to take over the gardens in the summertime, as well as become a resource for the school, to ensure that we're lifting the load off of our teachers and not expecting teachers to be garden experts, right? One of the things I'm also really proud of this program is that we offer up to $1,000 stipends for the teachers and the leads of the projects that they do. That is a no questions asked. It is a thank you for putting in the extra work in a world that often they are not given the support that are needed. We also partner a lot with actual youth groups that are doing the work already. They're not technically programs of Earth Charter Indiana, but we provide support that confront the climate crisis. Kids are from Lafayette who have now expanded to be statewide. I'll be talking a bit more about them. The Earthlings out of Terre Haute who are working to do climate resolutions, and which one I'm really excited about as a poet, the Indie Youth Poet Laureate program, which we're partnering with Voices Core to do that, and really bringing art into the talk of, let me rephrase that. Well, actually, no, bringing art into the talk of climate, right? And then also bringing climate into art forms. So let's get into my path. Like I said, I am not from a college background. I know that this program, what it offers is research-based. I wasn't able to do that in my life on a college campus. My research comes from experience on the ground, working with organizations and moving through life, which started in the 80s. I moved to the United States in 1980. And this was a very crucial time in my upbringing. And I really feel like we don't discuss enough about what has happened in the 80s, especially in looking about where we are today. As we know, right, the 80s is the Reagan years, and that's that trickle down economics, which is often where we're at right now. And many other things. This won't be a thing about Reagan, but it is very important to discuss what it was. Personally, I was madly obsessed with Janet Jackson and wanted to do everything in my power to be like her. And on a global level, right, Indiana in itself was really making a name for itself in horrific ways. And then eventually in better ways with our treatment towards Ryan White and the HIV and AIDS epidemic that was happening in that time period. Now with all that, like I said, Reagan wasn't just that trickle-down economics event, it was also the war on crime, the war on drugs, which was criminalizing drug use, right? It perpetuated filling our prison systems and was something that really impacted specifically BIPOC communities and the Black community in particular during the crack epidemic. Personally, I had stepped away from Miss Janet and moved into hip hop. And for me, this is something that I have to discuss and is pivotal to who I am as a human being. Really being able to see and witness the Black and Latinx community really come together, especially in different disenfranchised communities, and really create something, right? It was watching and witnessing the evolution of and revolution of art and finding your voice, and it was very pivotal. And still to this day, it's very pivotal on who I am as a human being. one of the things that I want to discuss about the state of Indiana also was Michael Taylor. And for me, this was a moment of really seeing how we were all discussing what was happening to Ryan White, but what happened to Michael Taylor was not discussed. And Michael Taylor was 16 and in police custody, handcuffed in the back of a squad car, and was shot. It was said that it was suicide, but I challenge you to think about how someone could be in the backseat of a cop car with their hands cuffed behind their back and shoot themselves. That was something that really resonated with me, especially in the city of Indianapolis. That was very important in my community. That didn't really get a lot of, if any, news coverage, aside from the Indianapolis Recorder, which is one of the oldest Black-owned and Black-ran newspapers in the country. Also, the 1980s, it's the Berlin Wall, right? I said in my bio, I am Afro-German. I was born in Germany. My mother is very German. I still have the vast majority of my family on my mother's side, my maternal side, is still in Germany. The Berlin Wall coming down was that first time that I saw what protesting could happen, what it could do, right? There was this thing that existed, a literal barrier that existed, that enough people showed up to fight against it, to eventually take it down. This became a personal thing for me because also affected my family. While most of us live on the northern west side, my mother had stories about trying to get into like East Berlin and what that looked like. And that was really something that resonated with me. I even had a piece of the wall that, that was so long ago. So who knows where that ended up being, but it was something that really sat with me and really showed me what protesting and revolution could look like. Now, around the same time, the other area that I ended up really starting to get activated in, especially at a young age, was the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. This became a global, worldwide movement. Corporations started getting involved and making statements, and it was really something that I became very interested in. I also was a part of a letter writing campaign that elementary school students across the country were doing, not for South Africa, but to campaign against dolphin-safe tuna, right? And it worked. Now, I have no idea if our letters worked. I still want to believe in my littlest heart that third grade me, like my letter was the one that sparked that change. And I still hold tight to that. But for me, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa really kind of solidified witnessing and feeling a part of something on a grander scale that really just affected who I was as a human. Now, in thinking about this and learning about the apartheid of South Africa, there was also a time period when I learned about Nelson Mandela and what it meant to be a political prisoner. And I started doing research on what political prisoners were and who they were, and then learned about the movement. I came across a book of poetry by Mumia Abdul-Jamal and really kind of delved into what Blackness meant in the United States, right? South Africa, Blackness was weaponized and really became the reason for apartheid, and really trying to delve into learning about what Blackness meant here in the United States. Excuse me. what isn't known about, many people don't know about the MOVE movement and the people of MOVE. The MOVE 9 is referred to, there's 9 political prisoners still in jail to this day, Mobia Abdul Damal being one of them. And the police force and the officials in Philadelphia actually bombed their home where 11 people, including 5 children, were murdered. This really showed me what it looked like and the result of being outspoken as a Black person in America, but also being outspoken and driven towards self-reliance. The MOVE group was really about family and really being self-reliant. They grew their own food. They homeschooled. They just really believed in family and love and the Black experience and being together and really really being self-reliant on each other. It was a community, and because they were also very outspoken about the establishment and the way the government reacted to them, they were brutalized. And as a young child, that just was something I couldn't get past, and something that really still sits with me to this day, of thinking who gets to be a political prisoner and why, and really questioning what and why that was. Moving to the 90s, I was a teenager moving into high school, junior high, high school, right? The infamous 90s that is being recreated now. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the fashion and styles of the 90s. 1990 is when I got to witness Nelson Mandela leaving prison. This image of him and his wife is one that still gives me goosebumps to this day. He was in prison for 27 years, and he was able to get out because of protest and because of support of the world. And then he was to become the president of South Africa, not even 4 years later. This was a moment when I saw that correlation between protesting and politics, really being able to witness that change can happen, not only through protesting, but also through showing up and voting. And that was really a pivotal moment for me in seeing that it didn't take one thing, it took a lot. And we're really thinking about what resilience is. For me, Mandela is one of the epitome, I don't want to say poster child because that is a goofy term, but he really was able to create change and withstood and kept his spirit going. And for me, he will forever be the epitome of that. The 90s also was Rodney King and the LA riots that happened after that, right? And for me, Rodney King was the first time my community and a lot of people were able to get together to witness police brutality. This was in a time period, mind you, right? The 90s, when there wasn't that much internet. We all watched the same TV shows and we all witnessed the same thing in the LA riots, or protest, as we like to say, really took hold and saw what happened in that, witnessing someone get brutalized to then have nothing happen to them, and really understanding what that frustration and that anger was, and what that looks like. It was also the same time that I learned about when something is to be a celebration. Now, mind you, in 1992 and 93, there were celebration riots that happened in Chicago after the Bulls won. One thing that I want to put in note is that 92 is the same year that the LA riots happened. Let me check my notes because I don't want to tell you the wrong number. During the Chicago Bull Riots, 682 people were arrested in 1992. When it happened again in 1993, 2 people died and 700 people were arrested. Of those 700 people, 98% of them were Black. Now, I understand that this is just one moment and one picture, but I do want you to think about how, take in this picture and see who's there, and really think about how is it possible that 98% of the people arrested in the year after the LA riots were 98% Black. The year prior, 69% were Black that were arrested. The political system and what happened, not the political, well, yeah, the political system, the policing is something that has always been something that I have paid a lot of attention to. I have to admit that unfortunately Y2K was something that I was a part of. We don't need to discuss that a lot, but in the world that sometimes we think about, we don't have answers, and it's just something I'm embarrassed about, but I can't not acknowledge that we were all worried about the computers failing in Y2K. I found my voice through poetry. I am a writer. I would not be where I'm at as an activist if it wasn't for poetry. And I wouldn't have gotten into spoken word poetry if it wasn't for Def Jam and hip hop. And that's why that correlation is there. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this. I started performing and curating events for spoken word. The reason why I feel like it's important to discuss is I don't think people talk enough about the importance of the artist and the movement towards changing the world and its impact. And really, you know, this takes it here, Nina Simone saying, an artist's duty is to reflect the times. It's something that I took very, very personally and became, I don't want to say a political poet, but I did speak on the experience as I saw the world and what the world was doing to me. I first started actually getting activated and really showing up into protesting during the 90s, during HJR3, which was the ban on same-sex marriage, and during the RFRA, also known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This is when I started showing up to the State House. I had that moment where I couldn't just be silent anymore, and I really needed to be present and be there. And this was the time that I really started to take that pivot of moving outside of just my art, but really showing up into spaces. I had the honor of working for the American Friends Service Committee, and me really sitting there and wanting to do more in my life. I came to realize that I needed to find other avenues to really evoke change. The American Friends Service Committee is a Quaker organization. I was able to follow in the footsteps of Bayard Rustin, who was discussed earlier, who was a Quaker and also taught Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the acts of nonviolence. He is extremely pivotal in the civil rights movement and never discussed because he was an out gay Black man. And everything that I do is to uplift his name. I have many, many talks about that. I did want to give us a chance to be able to hear from our speakers. If not, we move on. For time's sake, oh dear, that you will take the time to research Bayard Rustin. He is a gift to us, and I'm so grateful for him. Now, some of our, through the American Friends Service Committee, was a program called Canary Sanctuary, where that was one that would create for undocumented folk to be able to refuge within churches, within cities. It was something I was very passionate about. We also did cop watch trainings, bystander intervention. The deadly exchange was one that I worked on mostly, as it worked on what was happening internationally, and linking it to policing in the state of Indiana. I was taking things international level, bringing it into a local level. This work did be on the list. I'm in a couple of countries because of my work in Palestinian liberation. It is something that has been following me throughout my work. But when we're thinking about what resistance looks like, and we think about what happens to indigenous populations, my work in Palestine and learning about anti-apartheid and what that looks like really is something that I take much pride in. I honor being able to speak at rallies, and ranging from Aaron Bailey to working for the Poor People's Campaign, March for Our Lives, as well as many other campaigns that have happened here. The picture with me at the State House actually is when I became a target for white supremacists, and really had to take a look at how I was going to shift my activism in a way that wasn't going to be dangerous for my family or myself. This picture here where we're kneeling, this was the last rally that I spoke at, which was the Families Belong Together rally, in which some people saw children in cages and were advocating for families to be detained as opposed to not being deported at all. The reason why we're kneeling is because they played the national anthem, which was one of the most triggering things that I've witnessed at a protest in my life, still to this day. When I became targeted, I learned about what community looks like, and what community became for me is social justice coalition. We actually really had the privilege of really being one of the most intersectional coalitions that actually still is happening today. The social justice stood behind me there as we move forward. This letter is one that I was able to craft in solidarity for all of us who decided not participate in the Third Women's March after members of the Black Lives Matter group were ostracized for bringing race into the Women's March. This was a letter I was able to craft, and this is just showing the people that stand on it. We have Indigenous group, we have Jewish group, we have Palestinian groups, Muslim groups, Black group. Surge was a part of it. It was really the moment that I saw what community looked like. One of the things that I want to discuss and moving forward, I had the privilege of being in Bloomington on Inauguration Day in 2016 and learned about anarchist communities that existed throughout, not just the United States, but throughout the world. This is actually a picture of today in Athens. I challenge of what anarchy looks like to really realize that it just without authority, space for cops, for people rely on myself, right, and really exist as a community together without the rule of others. Anarchy, a term that I think is used in way more negative connotation than what it actually exists in life. I did want to mention for Institute, as I was going through dealing with the backlash of being outspoken, I luckily was able to come into the fold and really be supported by a group called the Keller Institute. This organization was started by family members and parents getting together that wanted to create space for their Black sons to be able to not just be on the streets. And after decades in this work has now become one of the leading community-based organizations in Indianapolis. I wasn't able to find jobs within nonprofits after AFSC, our program got closed, and the Indianapolis chapter had to be dissolved. And Kepler Institute was one of the only institutes and places that I was welcome as an activist. The shift that happened for me was trying to really think about how I was going to be a grassroots activist and kind of take a step back and support the youth and really bring community to the nonprofit realm. I am honored to be able to be a part of Earth Charter Indiana and to be able to bring my work as a frontlines grassroots activist into a space to combat climate change. My shift into environmental justice really became present in realizing that while racial justice is at the core of everything that I do and social justice at the core of everything I do, it really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but if we don't have food and air and water and all of those things, it really won't matter if we don't have these things that are tangible. I became very impassioned about food access, and the community garden that I became a part of with Kepler Institute changed my life. And it is what I am passionate about and bringing into my work at Earth Charter Indiana. I'm gonna, for lack of time, and hopefully we can have some questions, leave it at that space. I just really hope in this talk that we really think about focusing on community, right? And that resilience, and how communities all across every city and every state and every small town, there is a community there that is doing what they can to really make the best for themselves. And when we support those people doing it and giving them the resources, we can literally change the world. I am a huge advocate for localization of everything, and really anything that's happening on a grand scheme can be brought down to a community scheme and really focus there. And also that it's going to take all of us. No matter if you are passionate about food or science or policy or just want to raise beautiful babies, right? Like, there is work in centering resilience for all of us and really centering sustainability and moving forward. I do have, two things, call for action. There is a youth group here called the Confront the Climate Crisis Kids that are really working to create policy and legislation. If you want to find out more about what they're doing, please go to tinyurl.com/climate coalition forum. They're looking for institutes, colleges, universities, student unions to really support their work into getting climate recovery into the Indiana legislation bill this upcoming session. I challenge you guys to think about doing a climate recovery resolution in your school, in your dorm, in your church, in whatever you are, and really taking an effort to create change and really making a statement. And also to really think about who you're in community with and utilize that to create change within your community. Here is my contact information. If for anyone that would like to know more, I'm actually currently not on social media, but you can follow me and see what I'm doing when I get back on Tatjana Rebelle, and I can be found at Tatjana with a J at earthcharterindiana.org. And I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there's any questions.
First of all, thank you, Tatjana. That was awesome. You certainly described so many different kinds of resilience, which is, exactly what we're hoping to think through and have a discussion on now. And thank you for reflecting so much personally about how resilience has grown as a part of who you are. I want to ask a question first before I go to the audience questions. I'm really curious about your work with young people and how they react to the concept of social justice and environmental justice. Does it resonate with young people of all ages on some level? And can you reflect a little bit on that and how they're a part of making a difference?
Absolutely. Part of the reason why I shifted into working with youth is because they already understand racial justice. They they know that racism exists. They are fully aware of what's happening in the world. So we don't have to go through that educating on, right? They're already coming from a space of resistance and education, and they're already there. They are witnessing and feeling what is happening. So one of the things that I found, it is much easier in those spaces with youth to discuss what is happening on a grander scale because they know about it. So for me, it's easier because they're already there, and the rest of us are kind of just playing catch up.
Great. A specific question that came to me that's connected to that from one of the audience members is, what are you hearing from Indianapolis young people about their specific social and environmental concerns?
Full honesty, right now, the biggest concern for Marion County, Indianapolis youth is gun violence. I'm going to be honest. And one of the things that I have been really honored in doing is really working on creating spaces where kids aren't just on the street and it's acceptable to gun violence, but really becoming a part of community. And one of the things that also goes with that, right, if we're thinking about the causes for, especially in the grand scheme of what's happening in the world, we're thinking about there's lack of job, there's not food access, there's not really a lot of community resources. So really creating that coalition that's happening. There's a lot of dialogue. I mean, there is disparity in what's happening in the conversation between BIPOC youth and, let's say, suburban white youth, right? There's a disparity in what they're thinking about. But one of the things that I'm really excited about, especially in our work with Earth Charter, is getting these groups together to discuss what that looks like. And really having the opportunity to be able to bring them together to think about what that looks like. And then also, full honestly, we talk about like kind of those legacy ideas of what's happening. That's also something that's actually really important, right? Kids want to be able to have clean water, not have lead in their walls, and really thinking about that and redlining and what that looks like and what they have access to is also something that's really important to them. But a lot of them really want to get into the nitty-gritty of, combating what is gun violence, but also food access, which is why the school gardens and the community gardens have become vital into our work of ensuring that everyone actually has space to eat.
Sawyer asks, could you talk more about your movement back and forth between your art and activism? Have you felt a tension between inner and outer creative work?
That's so intense. I would not be here if it wasn't for my art. And it's because of my art that I have been able to create space to be honest. I am known for my honesty in my art and in my activism. It is not taken well amongst a lot of people, but luckily Earth Charter appreciates that and finds it as an asset. I have shifted a bit in my art, well, just in my life, after being targeted by, because of my speech for the March for Our Lives rally, and really trying to think about how I wanted to navigate in my life, not just my art. I'm really working on not centering trauma. So it has shifted how I work also is how I create. But I wouldn't be here without art. And I also have learned I can actually speak freer in my poetry than I can at a rally. I have performed poetry and said some of the most in-your-face stuff that I've ever said. But you get creative license, right? You're just an artist. You can say whatever you want. And I have said much tamer things at rallies and have actually had way more backlash. So for me, there's more freedom in speaking through art than there is in other spaces, and working to combine it in everything that I do.
So rather than attention, it sounds like you're saying your art is supportive of you as an activist and gives you resilience as an activist, maybe.
Yeah, I worked really hard to merge art and activism in everything I did. The spaces that I created were always that space to be honest about things. So it was really blending together. I wouldn't be able to do one without the other.
Yeah. Abby asks, I would love to hear more about how we can put Bayard Rustin's philosophy into action for environmental justice today.
I'm so sorry that clip wasn't able to be shown, but one of Bayard's main things was he refers to us as angelic troublemakers, and really using our bodies to kind of disrupt the system. And by using that's protesting. That's why I showed up at the State House, right? Because when you're physically in a space, you can't be denied. So I think one of the things that we could learn from Bayard is really showing up, right? There's so much legislation that's happening that needs support. Our Confront the Climate Crisis kids need support. They need people to show up to be able to get them meetings with these people by physically actually, and I realize it is a COVID world, and showing up in spaces might not be as comfortable, but you can show up in digital spaces and virtual spaces as well, the 2D as I like to call it. But really like showing up and being present, showing up to a community garden, starting a community garden, really like physically actually becoming active in creating that change. And I think environmental justice, that's so needed. If not, honestly, I think it's one of the leading things that we have to get kind of moving towards. We don't have a lot of time. So really becoming active politically and on the ground is going to be something I think Bayard would really commend and push for.
I appreciate what you just said, because I was going to ask you how COVID has impacted your ability to be active, right? And to be pushing for difference, for making a difference. It sounds like you feel like there's still a way to do it.
Oh, there are four. I know it's never fun, right? Like I don't ever want to be like letter writing but we need to show up. I think, the thing that we learned that I learned, right, with the Berlin Wall, and I learned with the anti-apartheid movement and South, like people showed up, and there's a moment when you're going to have to make that decision on how you're going to show up. And it's really important, especially now. One thing that I've learned, especially in the State House, is it's a lot easier for them to do things without faces looking at them. And once they are able to see that there are people showing up, right, it's not one person that creates change. It is the masses of us that are do it. So creating campaigns where we're showing up in their emails and blowing up their voicemails and really showing up at their offices is the only way that I feel like one of the most vital ways for us to move forward.
Tatjana, it's almost 1 o'clock, so I think I'm going to close us out. I want to express my gratitude for the time and the energy that you took to put this talk together. It was incredibly inspirational and informative, and we're thankful that you are an activist that is in our home state here, making a difference every day. We are thankful also to Earth Charter and their support of your work, and happy that ERI is able to continue to partner with you and Earth Charter in this good work that you do. And finally, thank you to the Emmys, Elaine and Phil, for your sponsorship of today's talk. We're greatly appreciative of it. So thank you, Tatjana, for your time. And folks, get in touch with Tatjana if you're interested in supporting her further. And join us in a couple weeks for our next resilient speaker. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.